I'm getting a live update.
Speaking of throwbacks to the 2016 election.
No. Yes?
So the world was burning there for a minute.
The 3rd Precinct Minneapolis Police Station is now on fire, Brian.
Yeah, I see that. To our viewers, it is the building where you can see, there it is.
Not kidding. We had literal police precincts burned down, among a whole host of other similar, smaller, but just as equally tragic skirmishes throughout the United States, and actually throughout the rest of the world, too. I won't be getting into extremely graphic detail about those, because no. It'll put me in a funk. But since the world is burning, and the police have been threatened to be defunded in some areas, barred in other areas, or from other areas, and some communities are wholesale choosing to disband them entirely, personal gun sales have gone up exponentially, as they are prone to do in such instances. Is anyone surprised? I myself became the proud owner of a Kimber Evo SP very recently, and I could not be happier with my selection of firearm. The trigger action is beautiful, the weight is perfect, and the way it sits against my palm, it's like it was made for my hand. My only displeasure with it is honestly in just the reloading of the damn mag, which can be a bitch around the 7th bullet, but y'all don't want to hear about that. You came here for some spicy hot takes. But this is important, and it kind of ties in with what it is that I'm trying to get at here in this video. You see, I remember both the day that I picked her out at the gun store and the day that I picked her up and paid for her in full. Both days were a several hour-long affair, both of which included a line of about 20 people deep in the hot, hot summer sun. That minor inconvenience when purchasing my gun, that can be attributed to the current state of the union that we find ourselves in today, my friends. Most definitely. The violence of the protests and the reaction to the death of George Floyd have culminated in a semi-lawless state in certain areas wherein the people are scared for their livelihoods, their loved ones, their homes, and themselves. This year has seen the return of the rooftop Koreans, a phenomenon that goes back all the way to the LA riots, but also we have seen the introduction of some novel players, namely Storefront Sikhs, the leather-vested cavalry, the chainsaw Hispanics, and the Storefront Italians. But most recently, it has seen the introduction of what I've seen some people call the St. Louis cul-de-sac commando couple, as seen in action in the video I'm about to show you.
Alright, y'all see he got a gun and shit, and y'all can see. Y'all see on my live feed live, he got his rifle. Y'all can see, he does have a weapon. As y'all can see, this individual does have a rifle. Y'all screenshot this, send it to me, show it.
Now, there is something to be said about the abysmal trigger and muzzle discipline being displayed here in these videos by both parties. I, personally, was always taught to keep your gun pointed away from a person unless you intended to shoot said person, and also to keep your booger flicker off the bang bang stick until you're ready to unload. But it's not every day that you get a visit from a collection of random strangers in front of your lawn during family dinner. Let's be honest. Random strangers that are chanting and drumming on their way to the mayor's house to demand her resignation for doxing one of their own. But that's not the focus of this video. I don't care about what the mayor did. We're talking about the random strangers versus this couple. These random strangers, who, for all this couple knew, could share the sentiments of the people who also happened to be walking down the street in front of private businesses and residences and thought to take a detour into said private establishments for a bit of late-night looting at some point. I've heard people say, they were on the sidewalk, not private property, being all harmless and shit. I had some time, and I did decide to use my powers of internet-diagnosed autism for good yesterday. Before we get into the grand sum of all of my sleuthing on the internet, I'd just like to state on the record, what I'm about to say and show you is by no means doxing, because the couple's residency and names have already been exposed to the public for all of us to know. And this was actually done years ago, when they'd first started showcasing the residence as an accomplishment of renovating their home. Add to that the fact that more recently there has been, and I previously mocked it in my stupid person voice, an intense ongoing debate about whether or not the protesters were on public property, or if actually the protesters were on private property and hence trespassing. Spoiler alert! Yes, they were trespassing, which, if the later the couple, Mark and Patricia McCloskey, were legally protected by Castle Doctrine in their actions. Castle Doctrine being the law that designates a person's home as a place in which that person has protections and immunities, permitting one, in certain circumstances, to use force. Everything I am about to disclose in this video is already public knowledge, from the St. Louis Post-Dispatch to CNN, from the Twitterverse to the National Park Registry, so ease the calamity in your memories, please and thank you. Well, yes, the neighborhood of this couple in question is in fact registered on the National Register of Historic Places, which, side note for a second, puts these residences in extra danger if we are to take the anti-everything history mobs of late and their vehemence against all things old, historical, and relic to heart. Anders Walker, a constitutional law professor at St. Louis University, has stated publicly the following in the St. Louis Dispatch: the homeowners broke no laws by brandishing or pointing weapons at them because Portland Place is a private street. He said the McCloskeys are protected by Missouri's Castle Doctrine. This claim is actually backed by this screenshot of the St. Louis zoning parcel map, showing that the road that the protesters took liberties with walking on actually does fall within the parcel of land ownership of the McCloskeys. I took the liberty of providing a link to St. Louis's zoning parcel map if you feel so inclined to check it out. Just scan till you find Portland Place, then alter the transparency and you can actually see for yourself where it is and what it is that is the zoning barrier. Further backing this claim that the street Portland Place is a private street is this picture of a document received on September 18th of 1973 and entered February 12th, 1974 into the National Register of Historical Places inventory. In section 1, you can see that it names Portland and Westmoreland places specifically, and then if you drop down to section 3, it stipulates that both streets' classification is private and restricted access to the public. And if you would like to double check this yourself, all links are in the description. Private has an obvious meaning to it, I would think. I don't need to define that for you. But restricted access to the public, what could that entail? Restricted public access means private property or the limiting of entry for a period of time by means such as signs, traditional agricultural fencing, or remote location, which we have in pictures of Portland Place, the gate entering into Portland Place prior to its destruction by protesters, allegedly. Meaning that the protesters had absolutely no right to be there on that sidewalk, no matter how you try and dice it, Twitter. The St. Louis couple, as far as I know, and I am not a legal scholar, are in the clear as far as displaying weapons at protesters in defense of their home. according to castle doctrine. They were quite literally defending their castle, and they had every right to do so, similar to those storefront Sikhs, the leather-vested cavalry, the chainsaw Hispanics, and the storefront Italians. And similar to everyone else who was absolutely terrified that an abundance of random protesters showing up in their neighborhood is going to devolve into a bunch of looting, burning, rioting, and violence. Come on, people. If you want people to refrain from a base fear instinct when they see you walking by, then police your movement better. Please. You can't enjoy the emotional driven catharsis of destroying your communities and still expect others to put up with it that live in those communities. You can't honestly expect that people won't act on that very real possibility that the same ire we're all watching through the lens of the internet for the last month or so now, won't be turned on them. Sorry, you can't have your cake and eat it too.